Today's video will demonstrate how to design a program using a flowchart. Hello, I'm James Helfrich. A flowchart is a powerful tool that allows us to design problems involving complex decisions. This video will demonstrate how to solve one such problem. When designing with a flowchart, we usually do it in a multi-step process. The first step is to create a draft, just the basic idea, super rough, usually on a whiteboard, very messy, but that's okay. And then we refine the design. And then we validate to make sure that it represents what the client or the product owner or whoever say, and then we implement the code. So the draft part is we look at the problem definition or the user story or the ticket or the scenario or whatever else it is, and we try to look for components that relate to algorithmic constructs like if statements and loops and assignment operators and stuff like that. And we don't really care about how it looks initially. It's probably going to be really messy. Almost always it's going to be squished in the corner. We're going to have part of the paper or the whiteboard be super sparse and other parts be super compact because we didn't really get things right. And we're also often not going to have the entire algorithm completely contained. It's probably going to be different fragments I'm going to have to piece together later, but that's okay. We're just trying to get ideas down. And then we refine. We try to reorder the decisions or move similar pieces of code together. We try to avoid the overlapping lines. And this is not just done to make it pretty, but rather we want to make our design ideas clear so we can communicate with other people and with ourselves. And then we want to validate it. We want to take it to our subject matter expert or product owner or client or whoever. And we want to see if this matches their idea of what the code should look like. And we want to make sure it's right before we invest in actually writing code. And then, of course, when we're finished, we implement it in the language of our choice. So let's take a look at how this works. I want to create a flowchart describing if a player can purchase Pennsylvania Avenue in Monopoly. And I have a couple rules that apply. If the property is owned and you land on it, you have the option to purchase it at a list price. If the product is unknown and the player lands on it, the player decides not to purchase the property, then it's auctioned, or I could purchase from another player, and I have to pay the full price, basically, at purchase time. So that's basically what's going on. So step one, I want to create a draft. So I'm going to look at each of these requirements in order. I'm going to start with this one. If the property is owned, well, I'm going to say, hey, is the property owned? It's going to be yes or no. And I land on it. Did I land on it? Yes or no. Then I have the option to purchase for the list price. So I could buy the property or not. Okay, so that requirement I've kind of got captured. I might want to reorder things, but for now I got it down. Then the next one, if the property is unowned, is it owned? And the player lands on it, and the player decides not to purchase the property, then I will have the whole auction process going on. And if I win the auction, then I can purchase it. And if not, then I can't. Okay. The next one, the player can purchase a property from any player anytime, provided they both agree on the price. So I'll say, hey, do you want to sell? If they say yes, then buy it. If they say no, then don't. And finally, I must pay the full price for the property. So do I have enough cash? If the answer is no, can't buy it. If the answer is yes, then I can buy the property. Okay, so now I have a draft. I have fragments. Now I got to put all these things together. So I'm just going to go for one step at a time. Is it owned? Did I land on it? And this is all fragments that I had before. And the property is unknown. The player lands on. The player decides not to purchase the property. Then I can do the auction. And then if the player purchases a property, then they both agree on the price. Are you willing to sell? If they say no, then don't. If the answer is yes, then I can buy the property and I must pay the full price. So do you have enough cash? If the answer is yes, then buy it. If the answer is no, then you don't. The last step is verification. I take my algorithm and I bring it up to all the stakeholders, the client, the product owner, who are the subject matter expert, and I walk through one step at a time. Let's go through this scenario. Do I go left? Do I go right? Do I go up? Do I go down? And the cool thing about a flow chart is that a non-technical person can usually understand and follow it, because we can follow through the decision process with our finger as we're at this stage, we're at this stage, we're at this stage. And then they can say, oh, wait, we forgot a problem or we forgot a condition, and then we can adjust for it. And then when I'm done, I want to take this flow chart and then I want to turn it into Python in this case. So I'm going to start, can I buy the property? Yes or no. And then is it owned by another? If owned by another, and I have some function to figure this out. And if the answer is yes, then I have to ask if I'm willing to sell. And if they're not willing to sell, I return false. Now, let's say that someone is on the property. then I have three options. Either no one's on the property, it's me, or it's someone else. Okay. And if it's someone else, then I return false. I really can't buy if it's not me. If it is someone else, then I have to see if I won the auction. And if I won the auction, if I didn't win the auction, then the answer is false. And then finally, if I did win the auction, then I can purchase the property. And now the last thing I got to do is I got to say, do I have enough cash? And if the answer is yes, then I could buy the property. And if the answer is no, then I cannot. This is example 1.4 and 1.5 from the flowchart chapter of the software design textbook.